My name is Gabriella DeGolia. I am a member of the Copper Beach community and a former staffer at Copper Beach. And I'm just really, really excited to be here with folks today because I am a mindfulness practitioner who has been practicing for about 10 years. And I am also someone who lives with chronic mental illness. I live with major depressive disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, OCD, and complex PTSD. So I have a lot going on in my mind and in my body. And I've found in my own experience that oftentimes in mindfulness spaces, the experiences of those who live with mental illness of any sort is often not really highlighted. And at least in my experience, conventional breath-based and practices that are focused on awareness of thought have not always been the most conducive to me being able to ground myself in the present moment, which to me, an essence of mindfulness is an ability to be here and now, as opposed to projecting myself into a future that hasn't happened or remaining in a past that has already happened. So I kind of view today as an opportunity to hopefully expand the conversation surrounding the intersections between mindfulness and mental health. And I want to offer a few practices that I have found helpful in my own experience as I navigate ups and downs with my mental health and as I try to maintain a mindfulness practice, even with that. That said, I do want to just make clear that I am just a regular person living with mental illness and who practices mindfulness. I'm not a therapist, I'm not a psychiatrist. And so I just want to highlight that my mental health journey is unique to me. And so is everyone else's. It's unique to each person. And so whatever resonates from what I share today, I encourage you to take it with you, and anything that doesn't resonate, I encourage you to leave it to the side or take note of it as something maybe to revisit in the future. And I see that someone else has joined us. Hello and welcome. It's great to have you here. My name is Gabriella and I'm a staffer at Copper Beach, and I'm just sort of introducing what we're going to be doing today. And I am someone who has practiced mindfulness for about 10 years, and I live with a variety of mental illnesses. And so my hope is to kind of expand the conversation of mindfulness to be a little bit more accessible and inclusive of folks, like me, who live with mental illness. So before I begin by offering the practices, something that I really like to say in mindfulness spaces is that I am someone who actually takes medication for my mental illnesses, and I have my medication here. I'm very grateful for my little pills, for the services that they offer me every day. And this isn't me trying to evangelize to say everyone should be on medication. It's just to acknowledge that oftentimes in mindfulness spaces, I have encountered the meditate, don't medicate mentality. And for me, at least, that really doesn't work. I actually benefit from medication as a way to help me have a solid foundation upon which to practice. So if medication is not something that you need, that's, amazing. And if you are someone who benefits from medication, then that doesn't mean that you are a bad mindfulness practitioner, or that if you meditated better or differently or whatever, that you wouldn't need your medication. I just like to highlight that one can be a mindfulness practitioner and a meditator in addition to taking medication, and that sometimes that's actually a very helpful combination to have. And I also just want to highlight that sometimes, at least in my experience, I have had to step away from a mindfulness practice because of where my mental health was at a particular moment. I had a depressive episode a few years back that necessitated that I take a break from practicing mindfulness because it was contributing to panic attacks and other exacerbations of symptoms that were just really unpleasant for me. And so this is just me trying to emphasize that mindfulness practice is not a cookie cutter practice like one might get the impression of through advertisements saying like everyone benefits from MBSR, or meditate 20 minutes a day and you'll be great. Like that's not actually the case for everyone. So I just like to highlight all of these things to say that as someone who practices mindfulness with my mental health, my mindfulness practice evolves and shifts as does my mental health. So I know that's a lot of disclaimers, I guess, before I'm offering practices, but I just like to really emphasize that each person's journey with mindfulness as it relates to mental health is unique. And I try to make sure that people don't feel like they need to be forced into a cookie cutter box in order to be a mindfulness practitioner. There's actually a lot of ways to practice mindfulness that can be more in line with our mental health than, sometimes what the kind of cookie cutter advertisements show. So before I go into the practices, I just want to explain a bit of what I'll be offering. I have found for myself, especially when I am in a place where breath awareness practices are difficult for me and awareness of thought is challenging for me because my thoughts are, not the most grounded or not as fruitful as I would like. I have found that an awareness of my external environment is a good way for me to access a sense of grounding into the present moment. And so I like to kind of compare my practices to a body scan, but rather than being a body scan, we're doing a scan of our environment. And so we'll be doing a practice where we'll scan our surroundings as a way to regulate the nervous system. And then after the scan of the environment, we'll kind of do another scan and do awareness of color around us. And then depending on the time, we'll do awareness of sound, just as a way to tap into different sensory organs and sensory mechanisms. So just wanted to open the floor for any questions either in the chat or in audio if anyone has them before I begin to offer practices. So just want to make some space for questions. And also Susie, if you want to chime in with any welcome, you're welcome to, but no pressure to.
Yeah, no, I just want to say thank you again for hosting this and for sharing, everything about yourself as well as your practice. I think that's really inviting for folks. So just lots of gratitude. So thank you so much, and go ahead, do your thing.
Awesome, thank you. But yeah, if anyone has questions or any inquiries before we start, feel free to voice them. And if not, I'll go ahead and start the practices. Well, hearing beautiful silence, I'll take that as an invitation to start the practices. So a lot of times in mindfulness, we are encouraged to close our eyes and, go within. We're not going to be doing that today because we're doing a, scan of our environment. I also find that especially for people with trauma, sometimes closing the eyes is not the most beneficial thing. So I often practice mindfulness with my eyes open, sometimes lightly kind of gazing out in front of me or straight ahead in front of me, depending on the practices that I'm doing. So today we'll be practicing with our eyes open. And I just want to invite you to find a comfortable shape with your body, however that looks and feels to you. And just go ahead and bring your awareness in front of you. And even though we're looking ahead, we can bring a softness to the eyes. And wherever our gaze lands, we can just take in what it is that we are seeing without trying to change it, without labeling it as good or bad. And from this place of looking ahead and kind of centeredness of the neck, if it's comfortable for you, I want to invite you to turn your head or your upper body to your right and just observe the surroundings to your right. So notice if there's any furniture there, what colors are coming up in your surroundings. If there's a window or a door, you can notice that too, and just take note of it. And from there, I'm going to invite you to bring your gaze back to center. And then we're going to continue off to the left and do the same thing. Just go ahead and notice if there is any furniture, any windows, any doors. Maybe there are other people in the room that you're in. And again, we're just observing here. We're not making any plans to change anything. And if it's comfortable for you, I also encourage you to look in back of you. So look behind you. And you can come back to the center. And last but not least, we'll be lifting our head up if that's comfortable and looking above us, noticing if maybe there are any lights or anything noteworthy on the ceiling. And then we'll bring our gaze down to the floor and just notice any particularities of the floor beneath us. Maybe it's wood, maybe it's carpeted. And we're just taking it in. And so from here, we can lift our gaze back up. And this exercise is, I find, very helpful for people who have trauma backgrounds, who live with mental illness, because it helps us to be attuned to our environment and helps to regulate the nervous system, and which can contribute to a greater sense of safety. Flowing from here, we're now going to engage in a color noting practice. And so we're going to do a very similar thing to what we just did, but I would like to encourage you just to look ahead of you, or if not straight ahead of you, then like slightly off to the side, depending on what colors are in your surroundings. And if you can, I invite you to find 3 things that are of the color red or something similar to the color red. And when you find those things, you can note the color red mentally in your mind, or even name the thing that you're seeing. So for example, for me, I notice a red colored pencil. And once you have found those 3 things that are the color red or something similar, I want to encourage you to find 3 things that are of the color blue or something similar to blue. So I notice a box that's blue. And then flowing from the color blue, I'd love to invite you to notice 3 things that are the color black or something similar to black. So I notice a picture frame that's black. And now from an awareness of visuals, we're going to shift just for a little bit to an awareness of sound. And I'd love to encourage you to keep your eyes open if you want. If you want to close them and that feels comfortable to you, you can. But we're going to be noticing the closest sound to us. It might be something right next to you in the room or something a little bit further away. And now I want to encourage you to try and determine what the farthest sound away from you is that you can hear. And from that kind of far off place, you can go ahead and bring your attention back to my voice and to where you are in the room. And now we're gonna just go ahead and sort of close the time of formal practice. But I just want to reiterate that these practices, they are intended to help us hone into this present moment and place through an awareness of our surroundings as opposed to awareness of our breath or our bodies or our thoughts. And I have often find like already right now, I personally just feel a lot more connected to where I am. And I find that these practices offer a way for me to, in a sense, like re-enchant my relationship to my surroundings. And especially when I'm having a bit of an off day with my mental health and being present with my thoughts or with my body is not easy, I find that doing scans of my environment like this help me to come back to the present moment and still give me a sense of presence, even though it's not the sort of classic mindfulness practice that is often advertised in like MBSR classes. So I just want to offer a couple other practices just verbally that you can explore that are somewhat similar to these. Another one that I really love is mindful eating. So if you eat something just very, very slowly, noticing the flavors and the textures on your tongue and the movement of your tongue can be helpful. I find for grounding myself into the present moment through food. When I feel comfortable with my body, I will engage in some very gentle movements during my meditation practice and bring awareness to those movements. And, you know, last but not least, I love going on mindful hikes and bringing my awareness to especially the bottom of my feet as I'm walking through nature. But all of these practices, especially the ones that we just did today, they can be complements to a more classic breath-based meditation. If that's something that you actually enjoy doing, the breath-based meditation work. And I find that they help me to really drop a pin in the here and now before I engage in those kind of more classic mindfulness practices when I'm in a place to do so. So I know that these are kind of pretty easy practices, you know, or simple practices. Maybe that's a better word than easy. But I find that they can be very helpful for me, and I hope that they offered something to you today. If they didn't really resonate with you today, then that's also completely fine. And, you know, as I said earlier, each of our journeys with mindfulness and mental health is unique. And so it's a matter of discovering what it is that helps us to gain a sense of presence in the moment that, you know, might be different from what other people suggest for us. So I'll go ahead and stop talking for the moment, and I would just love to invite any reflections or shares to come forth if people feel called to share. And I'm also happy to take any questions in the last, you know, 9 minutes or so that we have together today. So thank you so much for joining me in the practices. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I found them all very helpful.
Well, self-care, that's what I like. Self-care, and that's part of self-care, being aware of yourself. And self-love too. I try to love myself because that's all I got is me. So I got to love myself. And sorry to hear about your, I don't call it mental illness, I call it a condition or something. But they, you know, they try to call it mental health problems or behavior problems. I don't know what they call it now, but I'm just grateful to hear from you. And I said I'm self-aware and self-care and self-love. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David.
I just wanted to say that I'm someone who gets like overstimulated through sounds a lot. And so when I'm in like an environment where there's a lot of different sounds going on and I'm trying to focus on something, I've used these kinds of practices of like grounding yourself by paying attention to, you know, your senses and certain sounds or smells to sort of block out everything else. And so I do find this, even though I know you noted that it was sort of a simple practice, it can be simple, but can also be like really helpful if used correctly and if you pay attention to when you want to use it. So thank you. I appreciate the time you took today.
Thanks for sharing.
I just want to say, I really appreciate you sharing your personal story and kind of sharing all the things that you do to support your mental health. And you also mentioned that there seems to be, you know, kind of a, I don't know if it's a trend or what you would call it, but to kind of use mindfulness in place of other mental health treatments of just like, right, just breathe through it or just whatever, right? And you don't need these other things. Like, do you think people are hopefully understanding that there's an awareness that, you know, some folks just need more or different or, you know, whatever things for their mental health, or, you know, or do you think it's going in the opposite direction and people are thinking that mindfulness, I'm using that overgeneralized term, but can be a replacement for mental health treatment? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I think it, as like the answer to like most questions, like is like it kind of depends on where you are. But I do think that there was, especially a few years ago, there really, I think, was a very strong trend of mindfulness as a cure-all for everything. And I think that it got to such an extent that it started to backfire, and that there's actually quite a bit of research now on some people call it the dark side of mindfulness, and like the ways in which some percentages of people really mindfulness is actually not the right modality for them, and it can exacerbate, such as what happened to me, like panic attacks, and it actually almost led me to a psychosis once. So, you know, this isn't to say that like that will happen to everyone, but there is more research to support that mindfulness should not just be viewed as like a cure-all for everything, and that it should be offered as a complement to other things, you know, at the very least, not as a cure-all. And so I do think that there is more and more awareness about the importance of that, but, you know, different communities are catching up to that awareness at different rates. So yeah, it depends, I guess, is like the short version of the answer.
Right. That's fascinating. Yeah, I had never heard of that, and I really thank you for sharing that. I'm going to look into that more. You know, that it can be a risk for someone, potentially.
Yeah, potentially. Like usually that would be, you know, like I was going through a depressive episode, and I wasn't on medication at the time, and so my automatic thought was, oh, I need to meditate because that's what I always do to like help, and that just wasn't suitable for me. But I had not been educated to really think more holistically about different options for mental health. Like I was part of that wave of people who had been told mindfulness can cure everything. And that proved like just really, really not helpful for me when I was in the throes of a depressive episode. And so I think more people are starting to like learn that through trial and error, basically. And so more awareness of it is being shared, you know, just like here. Being shared more.
Yeah, no, it just goes to show you like everything is so unique. Like what works for one person is potentially really not going to work for somebody else, you know, and I think trial and error is right for each of us to just keep trying things that we can add to, you know, we've been focused on the toolkit idea of self-care, of like, you know, that preventative way of coming at it, like what do you actually need in your self-care toolkit to keep yourself, you know, grounded and on a healthy path. It just keeps reinforcing over and over again that it's like, you know, the trend is not to find a trend, it is to find what really just works for you. You know?
Yeah. So, like in school settings, mindfulness is becoming more and more common, which, in a generalized sense, I think could be a very helpful thing. But it definitely needs to be complemented with a conversation surrounding mental health, because there are some students for whom it's really not good to make them sit with their feelings or their thoughts, without an awareness of mental health, because some students come from traumatized backgrounds and that might not be very helpful for them. So as long as it's not viewed as like this cookie cutter solution to every single problem ever, and complemented with an awareness of all these other factors, it can help those for whom it's suitable, but it can, for those for whom it's not suitable, other tools, as you said, can be offered from the toolbox. So yeah. And I notice we have a couple minutes left before it's 2:00, and I want to respect your time, but I think we have time for a couple more.
Say that you mentioned you have mental illness. I just looked up my diagnosis. It really helped me to understand myself better by knowing my diagnosis. I was wondering how you use your diagnosis to help yourself.
Yeah, I use my diagnosis as a way to help myself in terms of contextualizing what's happening to me when I'm having an off day. I used to think, oh gosh, I'm feeling off. I didn't meditate well enough yesterday, or something like that. And now when when something like that happens, I use my diagnoses to give more compassion to myself and to just contextualize, oh, this is happening to me because something neurological is going on in my brain that I might have some ability to influence, but not entirely. And so it just helps me to, as you said earlier, to engage in self-love and self-care in a way that I think is more effective than when I didn't have a diagnosis and thought that I was just meditating wrong or doing things wrong. Sometimes diagnoses can be kind of a burden for some people, but for me, I find that they help to clarify what's going on for me. So thank you for the question.
Me too. I realized my diagnosis explained a lot about the way I am.
Yeah. Well, it's 2:00, and I want to honor each of your time. So just thank you so much for your presence and for helping to raise awareness about mental health in Connecticut and beyond. And Copper Beach is so thrilled to be doing this partnership. So just thank you again for being here, for all that you're doing. And obviously we'll continue to be in touch, throughout the rest of the month and beyond. So I hope you have a really lovely rest of your day. It's beautiful here in Connecticut. And just thank you again.